Have you ever wondered why you keep falling for people who don't love you back? Why does your heart race for someone who barely notices you exist, while ignoring those who would give anything for your attention? What if I told you that this painful pattern isn't random, isn't your fault, and actually reveals something profound about your unconscious mind? Carl Jung, one of the most revolutionary psychologists in history, discovered something shocking about human attraction. He found that we don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with missing parts of ourselves. And the people who don't love us back, they're mirrors reflecting our deepest, most hidden wounds. In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal Jung's groundbreaking insights that explain why unrequited love feels so addictive, why rejection triggers such intense emotions, and most importantly, how understanding this can finally break the cycle that's been sabotaging your relationships. This isn't just another psychology theory. This is the key to understanding why you've been unconsciously choosing unavailable people and how to rewire your attraction patterns for good. But first, if you're tired of feeling stuck in the same romantic patterns and want to understand the hidden psychology behind your choices, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, what you're about to learn will change how you see love forever. Now let me ask you something that might feel uncomfortable. Have you ever noticed that the people you desire most intensely are often the ones who seem just out of reach? The ones who are emotionally unavailable, already in relationships, or simply not interested? Meanwhile, the people who show genuine interest in you somehow feel boring, predictable, like something's missing. Jung would say this isn't coincidence. It's your unconscious mind at work, desperately trying to heal old wounds through romantic attraction. And here's the fascinating part. The very qualities that make someone seem irresistible to you are often the same qualities that ensure they'll never fully love you back. Think about your last few crushes or relationships. I bet there's a pattern there that you haven't fully recognized yet. A thread connecting all these people that goes deeper than physical attraction or shared interests. Jung called this phenomenon projection, but it's far more complex and life-changing than most people realize. When you understand what's really happening in your unconscious mind during attraction, everything starts to make sense. The person who doesn't love you back isn't just someone you're attracted to. They're a walking, breathing representation of your own psychological wounds. And your brain is convinced that if you can just win their love, you'll finally heal those wounds and become whole. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. This strategy never works. In fact, it keeps you trapped in a cycle of emotional pain that can last for years or even decades. So why does this happen? And more importantly, how can you break free from this exhausting pattern? To understand why you're attracted to people who don't love you back, we need to dive into Jung's concept of the shadow self. This is the part of your personality that you've rejected, hidden, or never fully developed. And here's where it gets interesting. You're unconsciously attracted to people who embody these shadow qualities. Let me give you a real example. Sarah, a successful lawyer, kept falling for creative, free-spirited men who lived chaotic lifestyles. These men were everything she wasn't: spontaneous, emotionally expressive, and completely unburdened by responsibility. But they were also unreliable, commitment-phobic, and ultimately unavailable. Jung would say Sarah wasn't really falling for these men. She was falling for the parts of herself she'd suppressed. The creative, spontaneous, emotionally free parts that she'd buried under years of achievement and control. But here's the catch. These men embodied her shadow qualities so completely that they couldn't provide the stability and commitment she actually needed. They were living out the parts of herself she'd rejected, which made them simultaneously irresistible and impossible to build a real relationship with. Now, before you click away thinking this doesn't apply to you, let me share something that might surprise you. Jung found that this pattern exists in everyone, regardless of gender, age, or background. The only difference is what specific shadow qualities you're projecting onto others. Maybe you're attracted to emotionally unavailable people because you struggle with vulnerability yourself. Maybe you chase people who are mysterious because you've never learned to embrace your own complexity. Or maybe you're drawn to those who seem confident and self-assured because deep down, you don't believe you're worthy of love. The person who doesn't love you back is like a mirror showing you exactly what you think you lack. And your unconscious mind believes that if you can possess them, you'll finally possess those qualities yourself. But Jung discovered something crucial. This never works because you can't heal your inner wounds through external validation. The very act of seeking completion through another person keeps you stuck in a state of incompleteness. Think about the last time someone was genuinely interested in you, someone who was available and wanted to build something real. How did that feel? If you're honest, it probably felt too easy, maybe even boring. And Jung would say that's because they weren't triggering your shadow projections. They weren't promising to heal your deepest wounds. This is why available people often feel less exciting. They're not carrying the projection of your unlived life, your rejected parts, your hidden potential. They're just themselves. And if you haven't learned to love and accept your own shadow, their genuine love might feel empty or insufficient. But here's what's about to blow your mind. Jung found that once you understand this pattern, you can completely transform your romantic life. Instead of unconsciously seeking people who will hurt you, you can learn to integrate your shadow and become attracted to people who can actually love you back. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal next is the specific psychological mechanism that keeps you trapped in unrequited love, and it's probably not what you think. Jung identified something he called the anima and animus, the unconscious feminine and masculine aspects within every person. And here's where unrequited love gets really interesting. You're not just projecting your shadow onto unavailable people, you're projecting your idealized inner opposite. For men, the anima represents the unconscious feminine qualities: intuition, emotion, creativity, receptivity. For women, the animus represents unconscious masculine qualities: assertiveness, logic, independence, strength. When these inner aspects are underdeveloped or rejected, they get projected onto potential romantic partners. But here's the twist. The people who trigger the strongest projections are often the least capable of actually embodying these qualities in a healthy way. They might seem to possess what you lack, but in reality, they're often struggling with their own psychological imbalances. Let me tell you about Marcus, a sensitive, artistic man who kept falling for strong, independent women who ultimately rejected him. These women seemed to embody the assertiveness and confidence he felt he lacked. But Jung would say Marcus wasn't seeing these women clearly. He was seeing his own underdeveloped animus projected onto them. The women who rejected Marcus weren't necessarily more confident or strong. They might have been defending against their own vulnerability, just as Marcus was defending against his own power. They were unconsciously attracted to his sensitivity because it represented their own rejected feminine qualities, but they couldn't accept it because they hadn't integrated those parts of themselves. This creates what Jung called a psychological complex, a knot of unconscious emotions, memories, and projections that gets triggered every time you encounter someone who seems to embody what you think you're missing. Now here's something that might make you uncomfortable. The intensity of your attraction to someone who doesn't love you back is directly proportional to how much you've rejected those qualities in yourself. The more you deny your own strength, the more attractive, unavailable, strong people become. The more you suppress your creativity, the more irresistible artistic types seem. But Jung made a revolutionary discovery. This attraction isn't really about the other person at all. It's about your own psychological wholeness. Your unconscious Mind is trying to guide you toward integration, toward becoming a complete person. But instead of doing the inner work to develop these qualities yourself, you're trying to possess them through romantic conquest. This is why unrequited love feels so urgent and consuming. It's not just romantic desire, it's your psyche's desperate attempt to become whole. And the person who doesn't love you back holds the key to parts of yourself you've never learned to access. But here's the liberating truth Jung discovered. Once you understand this mechanism, you can use it as a roadmap for personal growth instead of a source of romantic suffering. Think about the person you're attracted to right now, or the last person who broke your heart. What qualities do they seem to possess that you feel you lack? Write them down. Those aren't just attractive traits. They're aspects of your own personality that are begging to be developed. The person who doesn't love you back isn't your missing piece. They're a mirror showing you which pieces of yourself you haven't learned to love yet. But Jung discovered something even deeper about why we're attracted to people who can't love us back. It's not just about our shadow or our animus. It's about repeating the emotional patterns we learned in our earliest relationships. Jung called this the family complex, and it's probably the most powerful force shaping your romantic choices. The way you learn to give and receive love in your family of origin becomes the blueprint for what feels familiar and right in romantic relationships, even when it's actually harmful. If you grew up with a parent who was emotionally unavailable, critical or inconsistent in their love, your nervous system learned to associate love with anxiety, uncertainty, and the need to prove your worth. Fast forward to adulthood and stable, available love might actually feel wrong or uncomfortable because it doesn't match your internal template. Let me share Lisa's story. She grew up with a father who was brilliant, charismatic, and completely absorbed in his work. He loved her, but his attention was unpredictable and had to be earned through achievement. As an adult, Lisa found herself irresistibly drawn to successful, ambitious men who were too busy or self-focused to give her consistent attention. The men who were emotionally available and wanted to prioritize her felt weak or needy to Lisa. They didn't trigger the familiar adrenaline rush of trying to earn love from someone who was barely present. Her nervous system had been wired to equate love with the challenge of winning over someone unavailable. This is what Jung meant when he said, "We're destined to repeat our unconscious patterns until we make them conscious." Lisa wasn't choosing unavailable men because she enjoyed being hurt. She was unconsciously seeking to heal her relationship with her father by finally winning the love of someone similar to him. But here's what's crucial to understand. This strategy never works because it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding. The unavailable person isn't your parent, and winning their love won't heal your childhood wounds. In fact, it often recreates the same emotional dynamic that wounded you in the first place. Now, I want you to pause and think about this honestly. What was the emotional climate of your childhood home? Was love conditional or unconditional? Did you have to perform, achieve, or be perfect to receive attention and affection? Or maybe love came with drama, chaos, or emotional intensity? Whatever pattern you learned in childhood is likely playing out in your romantic life right now. If love felt dangerous, you might be attracted to people who make you feel unsafe. If love required constant effort, you might be drawn to people who make you work for their attention. Jung found that we unconsciously choose partners who will help us recreate familiar emotional states, even when those states are painful. This is why therapy sometimes feels necessary before you can have healthy relationships. You need to understand and heal these unconscious patterns before you can choose differently. The person who doesn't love you back isn't randomly cruel or unavailable. They're perfectly calibrated to trigger your deepest wounds and most familiar patterns. Your unconscious mind chose them specifically because they felt like home, even if home wasn't a safe place. But here's the hope Jung offers. Once you understand these patterns, you can begin to choose differently. Instead of being driven by unconscious compulsions, you can make conscious choices about love. Jung identified several psychological defense mechanisms that keep us trapped in patterns of unrequited love, and understanding these might be the key to finally breaking free from relationships that hurt you. The first is what he called idealization. When someone doesn't love you back, your mind tends to inflate their positive qualities and minimize their flaws. They become not just attractive, but perfect. This serves a psychological function. It protects you from having to face the reality that you're choosing people who can't or won't love you properly. Think about it. If the person who rejected you is absolutely perfect and amazing, then their rejection says nothing about your worth. It's just bad luck or bad timing. But if you saw them clearly, with all their limitations, fears, and issues, you'd have to confront the uncomfortable truth that you're attracted to people who aren't actually good partners for you. The second defense mechanism is projection of potential. This is where you fall in love not with who someone is, but with who you imagine they could become. You see glimpses of emotional availability, commitment, or love, and your mind constructs an entire fantasy around their potential transformation. Jung would say this is your unconscious mind, trying to avoid the grief of accepting that this person, as they are right now, cannot meet your needs. It's easier to live in hope than to face the loss of your romantic fantasy. The third mechanism is what Jung called repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to repeat familiar patterns, even painful ones, because they feel like home. Your nervous system is more comfortable with familiar pain than unfamiliar peace. This is why you might find yourself making the same romantic mistakes over and over again, even when you consciously know better. It's not because you're stupid or masochistic, it's because your unconscious mind is trying to master an old trauma by recreating it in a new context. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. These defense mechanisms only work when they're unconscious. The moment you become aware of them, they begin to lose their power over you. Right now, I want you to think about your current or most recent romantic obsession. Can you see any of these patterns at work? Are you idealizing this person, seeing only their best qualities while ignoring red flags? Are you in love with their potential rather than their reality? Does the emotional dynamic feel familiar in a way that connects to your past? If you're being honest, you probably recognize at least one of these patterns. And that recognition is actually the beginning of your freedom, because Jung found that consciousness is the antidote to unconscious compulsion. When you can see your patterns clearly, you can begin to make different choices. Instead of being driven by unconscious needs and projections, you can start choosing partners based on their actual ability to love and be loved. But there's one more layer to this that Jung discovered, and it might be the most important piece of the puzzle. It's about why your unconscious mind is so invested in keeping you attracted to people who can't love you back. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal will show you exactly how to transform your romantic patterns from the inside out. Here's something Jung discovered that most people find shocking. Your unconscious mind actually has a purpose for keeping you attracted to people who don't love you back. The suffering isn't random or meaningless. It's serving a psychological function that you might not be ready to give up. Jung called this the neurotic gain of unrequited love. On the surface, being rejected hurts terribly, but unconsciously, this pain might be protecting you from something that feels even more threatening: the vulnerability of being truly loved and seen. When you're obsessed with someone who doesn't love you back, you get to experience the intensity and passion of love without the risk of real intimacy. You can feel deeply without being truly known. You can long and yearn and feel alive without having to show up authentically in a relationship. This might sound crazy, but think about it. When someone is unavailable, you never have to risk boring them with your everyday self. You never have. To navigate conflict, compromise, or the mundane aspects of real partnership, you get to stay in the romantic fantasy where love is always intense, always dramatic, always just out of reach. For many people, Jung found, this feels safer than the terrifying prospect of being loved for who they actually are. Flaws, fears, and all. Unrequited love lets you hide behind the persona of the devoted lover while avoiding the deeper work of becoming a person capable of receiving love. Let me tell you about David, who spent 5 years obsessed with a woman who was clear about not wanting a relationship with him. He interpreted every kind gesture as a sign of hidden feelings, every conversation as a step toward romance. His friends were frustrated, his family was concerned, but David couldn't let go. In therapy, David discovered that his obsession was protecting him from having to face his deep-seated belief that he was fundamentally unlovable. As long as he was chasing someone unavailable, he never had to test that belief with someone who might actually accept him. The rejection felt terrible, but it was familiar. It confirmed his unconscious conviction that love was something he had to earn, chase, and prove himself worthy of. Available love, on the other hand, would have challenged his entire identity and forced him to heal his relationship with himself. This is what Jung meant when he said that neurotic suffering often serves as a defense against growth and change. The pain of unrequited love, while real, might be protecting you from the even greater fear of discovering that you are worthy of love exactly as you are. Now, I want you to consider something that might feel uncomfortable. What would you have to give up if you stopped chasing people who don't love you back? What familiar patterns, beliefs, or even aspects of your identity would have to change, maybe? You'd have to give up the romantic story of yourself as the devoted lover who loves more deeply than anyone else. Maybe you'd have to face the fear that you're not as special or deep as you thought. Maybe you'd have to risk the vulnerability of showing up authentically with someone who actually wants to know you. Jung found that people often resist healing their romantic patterns not because they enjoy suffering, but because they're unconsciously terrified of who they might become without that suffering. But here's the beautiful truth he discovered. On the other side of that fear is the possibility of love that doesn't hurt, passion that doesn't require drama, and connection that doesn't depend on conquest. The question is, are you ready to trade familiar suffering for unfamiliar joy? Jung's greatest contribution to understanding love was his concept of individualization, the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are, integrating all aspects of your personality and learning to love yourself completely. And he found that romantic relationships are one of the most powerful catalysts for this process. When you're attracted to someone who doesn't love you back, Jung would say your psyche is actually trying to guide you toward individualization. The person you're obsessing over represents parts of yourself that you need to develop, accept, or integrate. But instead of doing the inner work, you're trying to possess these qualities through romantic conquest. This is why unrequited love feels so much like a spiritual crisis. It's not just about wanting someone, it's about your soul's deep longing to become whole. The person who doesn't love you back is like a messenger from your unconscious, pointing toward aspects of yourself that are ready to be born. But here's what most people miss. The goal isn't to win over the unavailable person. The goal is to develop the qualities they represent so completely that you no longer need to seek them in others. Remember Sarah, who was attracted to chaotic, creative men. Jung would say her soul was calling her to develop her own creativity and spontaneity. Instead of chasing artistic men who couldn't commit, she needed to become the artist herself. To let herself be messy, imperfect, and spontaneous in her own life, as Sarah began to honor her creative side, taking art classes, writing in a journal, allowing herself to be more emotionally expressive, something fascinating happened. She stopped being attracted to unavailable creative types. They no longer triggered that desperate sense of missing something essential. Instead, she found herself drawn to people who were both creative and stable, both artistic and reliable. People who had done their own inner work to integrate different aspects of their personality. People who could actually love her back because they had learned to love themselves completely. This is what Jung called conscious love. Attraction based not on unconscious projections and unhealed wounds, but on genuine compatibility and mutual wholeness. It's what becomes possible when you stop trying to complete yourself through others and start doing the work of becoming complete within yourself. The process isn't easy. It requires facing parts of yourself you've been avoiding, developing qualities you've been rejecting, and letting go of romantic fantasies that have been protecting you from deeper truths about yourself. But Jung found that people who do this work transform not just their romantic lives, but their entire existence. They become more authentic, more creative, more fully themselves. And paradoxically, this makes them far more attractive to people who are capable of real love. Think about the person you're currently attracted to, or the last person who broke your heart. What qualities do they possess that fascinate you? Now imagine spending the next year developing those same qualities in yourself. How would that change not just your romantic life, but your entire sense of identity and purpose? Jung believed that every unrequited love is actually a call to become more yourself. The question is, will you answer that call by chasing someone else, or by embracing the person you're meant to become? This is the path from unconscious attraction to conscious love, from seeking completion in others to finding wholeness within yourself. Jung identified specific signs that indicate you're breaking free from patterns of unrequited love and moving toward healthy relationship patterns. Understanding these signs can help you recognize your own progress and stay motivated during the challenging process of transformation. The first sign is what Jung called projection withdrawal. This is when you start seeing the object of your obsession more clearly, without the idealization and fantasy that once made them seem perfect or essential to your happiness. You begin to notice their flaws, limitations, and incompatibilities without feeling devastated by these realizations. Maria noticed this happening when she could finally see that her longtime crush was actually quite self-centered and emotionally immature. Instead of making excuses for his behavior or believing he would change, she felt a kind of relief, like waking up from a dream that had been consuming her energy for years. The second sign is decreased emotional reactivity. When someone who used to trigger intense feelings of longing, jealousy, or desperation starts feeling more neutral to you, it means you're no longer projecting your unconscious material onto them. Their approval or rejection doesn't determine your self-worth anymore. You might notice that you can see photos of them on social media without feeling that familiar pang of longing. You can hear about their new relationship without feeling crushed. This isn't emotional numbness, it's emotional freedom. The third sign is increased attraction to available people. As you integrate your shadow qualities and heal your family patterns, you'll naturally start being drawn to people who can actually love you back. What once felt boring or too easy will start feeling peaceful and exciting in a completely different way. Jung found that healthy attraction feels different from neurotic attraction. It's less desperate, less consuming, but somehow more real and sustainable. Instead of feeling like you're going to die if you can't have this person, you feel curious about getting to know them better. The fourth sign is what Jung called authentic relating. This is when you start showing up as yourself. In romantic situations, instead of performing the role you think will win someone's love, you stop trying to be perfect, mysterious, or whatever you think will make you irresistible. This might feel terrifying at first, because it means risking rejection for who you actually are, rather than for the persona you've been presenting. But Jung found that this authenticity is what makes real love possible. The fifth sign is emotional self-regulation. Instead of needing another person to make you feel worthy, complete, or alive, you develop the capacity to generate these feelings. From within, you can be alone without feeling desperate for connection. You can be in a relationship without losing yourself. Now, I want you to honestly assess where you are in this process. Can you think of someone who used to trigger intense attraction, but now feels more neutral? Have you noticed yourself being drawn to more available people lately? Are you starting to show up more authentically in romantic situations? If you recognize even one of these signs, it means Jung's process of individuation is working in your life. You're becoming more yourself, which is the foundation for attracting and maintaining healthy love. The journey from unconscious attraction to conscious love isn't linear, and there will be setbacks. But each time you choose self-development over romantic fantasy, you're rewiring your brain for healthier relationships. Jung didn't just diagnose the problem of unrequited love, he provided specific practices to help people transform their romantic patterns. These aren't quick fixes, but deep work that can fundamentally change how you experience attraction and relationships. The first practice Jung recommended is what he called active imagination. When you feel intensely attracted to someone unavailable, instead of trying to win them over, you dialogue with that attraction internally. Ask yourself, what does this person represent to me? What qualities am I seeing in them that I wish I had? Write down everything that attracts you to this person. Then ask yourself how you could develop these same qualities in your own life. If you're attracted to their confidence, what would it look like to become more confident yourself? If you're drawn to their creativity, how could you express your own creative nature? The second practice is shadow integration work. Jung believed that we're often attracted to people who embody our rejected or underdeveloped qualities. Start paying attention to what you criticize or judge in others. This often points to shadow aspects you need to integrate. For example, if you judge people for being too emotional, you might need to develop your own emotional expression. If you criticize others for being selfish, you might need to learn healthy selfishness and boundary setting. The third practice is family pattern exploration. Jung encouraged people to consciously examine their family of origin to understand how early relationships shaped their romantic templates. Ask yourself, how did your parents show love? What did you have to do to receive attention and affection? How did conflict get handled in your family? Once you identify these patterns, you can start making conscious choices about whether to repeat them or create something different. This might involve therapy, journaling, or honest conversations with family members about your childhood experiences. The fourth practice is dream work. Jung believed that dreams often contain guidance about our romantic patterns and what we need to heal. Start keeping a dream journal and pay attention to romantic themes, recurring characters, or symbols that appear in your dreams. Often, the person you're attracted to in waking life will appear in dreams, showing you something about yourself that you need to understand. These dreams can provide profound insights into your unconscious motivations and patterns. The fifth practice is conscious dating. This means approaching romantic connections with awareness of your patterns and triggers. Before going on dates or entering relationships, get clear about what you're actually looking for versus what your unconscious patterns might be seeking. Practice noticing when you feel that familiar spark of intense attraction. Instead of automatically pursuing it, pause and ask yourself, is this attraction based on projection and fantasy or genuine compatibility and connection? Jung also recommended developing what he called holding the tension. This means learning to sit with uncomfortable feelings, longing, rejection, uncertainty, without immediately acting to relieve them through romantic pursuit or fantasy. These practices require patience and consistency. Jung found that transforming romantic patterns typically takes years, not months. But the people who commit to this inner work often report that their entire relationship to love and intimacy transforms in ways they never thought possible. The goal isn't to never feel attraction again, but to feel attraction that serves your highest good and leads to relationships that actually nourish and fulfill you. As we come to the end of this deep dive into Jung's understanding of unrequited love, I want you to sit with a profound realization. Every person you've ever loved who couldn't love you back was actually your psyche's attempt to guide you toward wholeness. They weren't obstacles to your happiness. They were mirrors, reflecting parts of yourself that were ready to be integrated and healed. Jung's revolutionary insight was that we don't really fall in love with other people. We fall in love with projected aspects of our own souls. The person who breaks your heart by not loving you back is actually showing you exactly which parts of yourself need your attention, acceptance, and development. This means that all those painful experiences of rejection and unrequited love weren't meaningless suffering. They were your unconscious mind's way of pointing you toward the work you need to do to become whole. Every unrequited love is actually a call to self-love. Every rejection, an invitation to self-acceptance. But here's what Jung discovered, that changes everything. Once you do this inner work, once you integrate your shadow and heal your family patterns, once you learn to love yourself completely, you naturally stop being attracted to people who can't love you back. It's not a matter of willpower or discipline. It's an organic shift that happens when you no longer need others to complete you. The people who once seemed irresistibly attractive because they embodied your missing pieces will start feeling neutral or even unappealing. Meanwhile, you'll find yourself drawn to people who have also done their inner work, who can show up authentically and love you for who you actually are. This is what Jung called conscious love. Relationship based not on unconscious projections and neurotic needs, but on genuine compatibility between two whole people. It's love that doesn't hurt, passion that doesn't require drama, and intimacy that doesn't depend on conquest. The journey from unconscious attraction to conscious love isn't easy. It requires facing your deepest fears, healing your oldest wounds, and becoming the person you were always meant to be. But on the other side of this transformation is a love that most people only dream of, stable, passionate, and deeply fulfilling. So the next time you find yourself intensely attracted to someone who doesn't love you back, remember Jung's wisdom. This person isn't your missing piece. They're a mirror showing you which pieces of yourself are ready to be discovered, developed, and integrated. The love you're seeking isn't out there in some perfect, unavailable person. It's inside you, waiting to be awakened through the courageous work of becoming whole. Your romantic patterns aren't your destiny. They're your starting point, and with Jung's insights as your guide, you can transform from someone who chases unavailable love into someone who attracts and maintains the deep, authentic connection your soul truly craves. If this resonates with you and you want to dive deeper into understanding your own romantic patterns through the lens of Jungian psychology, make sure you're subscribed, because we'll be exploring more of these life-changing insights in upcoming videos. And remember, the person who doesn't love you back isn't your problem to solve. You are, and that's exactly where your power lies.